I don't know. I think a big thing is coming down. I think a really big thing that holds a lot of people back is the concept of libertarian free will. I think is a really cancerous concept. It's very addictive, and it feels very good to believe in that. But I think that it holds a lot of people's like mental development back in terms of like understanding how the world like actually works. What is libertarian free will? Without getting, I don't want to get too into philosophy memes. Libertarian free will. Okay, so basically, the way that the world is understood is that you as a person are an amalgamation of your life experiences and your genetics, right? That's essentially what you are. That if you could put yourself in some type of incredibly complicated machine and measure you, you could, with 100% accuracy, predict every single decision you'll make. So if I could measure every single thing in your brain, put it into a machine, and then measure it, I could predict with 100% accuracy how you would respond to every situation, respond to every question, blah, 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 right? This is something that seems to be agreed upon philosophically by almost everybody. There are a few philosophers that are determinists, and there are a decent chunk of philosophers that are compatibilists, which is really determinism with a different name. So, like, it seems like most people believe, at least philosophically, that this is how people function. And I've never heard a scientist deny any of this either. Things being caused by antecedent causes is a pretty well-accepted thing as well, right? So if we reframe, okay, so that's one way to view the world, that people and the way that they act is dependent heavily upon their environment, and et cetera, right? So that's one way to view the world, okay? If we view the world that way, right? Well, what we need to do, if you view the world that way, then from there stems, we need to create optimal environments to produce optimal people. If we believe that people are the result of their environments, then that means that we need to make the environment as good as possible, right? That's what we have to do. That's where I sit now, right? So there's a concept called libertarian free will, and I don't even think in philosophy this is believed in anywhere, but it's a big meme pushed by libertarians, which I think is why it's called libertarian free will, right? And the reason why people call it, what libertarian free will is this idea that anybody can be their own perfect agent and is capable of acting free of any type of influence from the outside and is capable of making their own decisions, blah, 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 blah. So if you believe in this, then your messaging changes, because now what you need to do is you need to tell people, like, for instance, black people in bad communities, right? Instead of waiting for the government or waiting for somebody to help you, you need to rise up and be better than your causes. And the problem with libertarian free will is that there are a ton of cognitive biases that uneducated and unaware people fall into very, very, very quickly, very easily, that I used to, right? So a really big bias is what was I thinking of? Oh, survivorship bias, right? So here's a bias. You put 100 people into a shitty environment. 2 of them come out successful. Those 2 people might say immigrants experience this a lot, right? These 2 people might say, well, look, I was able to do it. I know somebody that was able to do it. My friend was able to do it. Anybody should be able to do it, right? Because you survived a situation, or because somebody got out of a situation, they have a bias where they think that any other person could get out, right? Ignoring that they might have had some advantages conferred to them that they weren't aware of, or maybe they just got really lucky, or maybe they were an exceptional person, but it would be irrational to expect everybody to be somewhat exceptional, right? So to some extent, I had survivorship bias for a long time, right? Well, I was in a really shitty situation. My girlfriend was knocked up. I had a house I couldn't afford anymore because I lost my job, and I was carpet cleaning. But look, I still found a good job. I make a lot of fucking money doing what I do. If I can do it, anybody can do it, right? That kind of survivorship bias like really fucks with you and plays into that libertarian free will idea, like really hardcore. That's why you see those people pick out like exceptional examples all the time. Like, well, this black actor, Morgan Freeman, was able to come from, well, I don't know where he came from, right? But some actor was able to come from nothing, and look what he did. Well, okay, maybe he's an exceptional person. Do you think it's realistic that every single person can be as exceptional as that person? But yeah, I'm sorry. Ooh, okay. Libertarian free will has nothing to do with political philosophy. Libertarian has 2 completely different meanings in political philosophy and metaphysics. That might be true, but the concept of libertarian free will definitely bleeds into a lot of libertarian and right-leaning thought, if that makes sense. Libertarian as a philosophy is something that I've never grappled with, and I don't know. I'm only familiar with the concept of libertarian free will, and I know this concept very well. It's what most people think of when you say free will, and I know that a lot of right-leaning people and libertarians believe in it, for sure. You think it's because you're basically redefining free will? Yeah, I don't think compatibilists believe in free will at all. I think that they want to hold on to that. This is what it feels like compatibilism is to me, okay? Okay, without having any background in philosophy, okay? Here's what it feels like, okay? We write a whole moral system, okay? Moral system. Look at all these morals that we have, okay? And all these rules and consequences and blah, 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 okay? What's the most important part of any moral system? I say this without actually knowing, but from what it seems, right? It seems like, well, in order to have a moral system, we need agents capable of choosing between A and B. If you can't choose something, then how can we assign any type of moral agency to you, right? If a boulder falls onto a person, we never call that boulder evil. Or we never call tornadoes evil. Why? Because these are just natural events that are just caused by things that they have no control over. The rock didn't choose to land on somebody, right? And same thing with a person, right? If a person shoots somebody, why are you evil? You're evil because you picked it, right? So it seems like this we need this choice, right, in order for all of our moral systems to work. So what happened was, at some point, I guess people were thinking, I don't know the timeline or anything, I'm totally bullshitting on this, but it seems like at some point somebody was like, you know what, dude, the idea that free will exists, that's actually like really fucking stupid. It doesn't really make sense at all. We don't believe in religion, right? Most of us are atheist or adeist or whatever, right? Not whatever. So like, we know that the mind is physical, and all physical things have prior causes, so we can't actually be these agents of like divine free will. It doesn't make any sense. Well, oh shit, if that's true, then we have to throw everything out. That's actually fucked. We're totally fucked. Well, what do we do now? We have to like reconstruct. Do we even have morals or anything at that point? How can anybody be held responsible? Like, well, this is really hard. Okay, how about this? What if we just take free will, which means the ability to act with freedom from your environment, right? That's free will, right? What libertarians believe. What if we just make this mean like something totally different? Like, everybody believes in free will, but what if we say that free will actually means that like nobody's forcing you to do it, so it's kind of like you're making, right? That can be that, and we'll call that compatibilism because it's compatible with our desire to have a moral system, but it's also kind of not bullshit because we've redefined what free means. That's what it comes off. That's like what it comes off to me. This is ignoring quantum theory. Quantum theory has nothing to do with any of this and doesn't influence any of this. Whether or not quantum randomness exists doesn't mean that you can exert any type of influence over it. Even if the universe isn't deterministic, maybe that's a bad word to use, but even if the universe isn't deterministic because of some kind of quantum fuckery, you can't exert any influence over that quantum fuckery, so it may as well be deterministic insofar as what you're concerned with. Destiny, proof it? I can prove it right now. Can you exert any influence on, can you collapse wave functions into certain like things? Like, no, you can't. Your brain can't do that. You don't do that. You don't exert any kind of influence on a quantum level. Like, I think the reason why it works out is partly the ease of mind you get from having to confront the atheistic determinism. Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. It feels like, well, this would ruin everything. But, like, I mean, I understand, like, me being somewhat of a determinist or whatever you would call it. Like, I don't think that free will exists at all. You kind of have to live your life like it does, right? I agree with that you can't live your life like it's very hard to construct a notion of free will that looks like libertarian free will and which is not self-contradictory. Yeah, sure. Mental break. Oh. Would you be okay if instead they relabel the concept of free will to another name? Yeah, sure. Because when you say free will, nobody in the general population believes what compatibilists believe. When a compatibilist says they believe in free will, that's not what the average person is thinking of. And you are not rigorous either. Hey, the world contains true random, therefore there is no free will. That was good enough. What? My lack of free will comes from the following, okay? This is where my lack of free will comes. If this isn't rigorous enough for you, feel free to present something that would challenge this, okay? Everything in your mind is a physical thing, right? I believe that people are part of the physical world. You don't have an external soul. You don't have any type of metaphysical realm to draw thought or inspiration from. There is no such thing as divine, unique inspiration. That these concepts don't really exist in the real world. So if your mind is a physical thing, then you are encompassed by all the rules. You're bound by everything else that every other physical thing is, right? If I drop this thing, right, something will happen because of prior antecedent causes. When I exert a force on this, something predictable, somewhat predictable will happen, right? I believe that humans are more or less the same way. So you can't possibly believe in any type of libertarian ideal free will if you believe those things, unless you believe that humans or the mind of the human is somehow extra special or metaphysical versus anything else, right? I don't think that, and I've never ever, aside from religion, I've never heard of a convincing argument of that, right? That's it. There. If you think you have a good challenge to that, trying to assert that there's some weird quantum randomness doesn't point to anything having to do. Quantum randomness doesn't confer free will onto any other, onto this can of Red Bull, onto my wallet or my S8 Plus. It doesn't like... It is not predictable. It is true random. Okay, whether it's predictable or not is irrelevant to the question of free will. is what I'm trying to say. Concept of free will models something that conscious people seem to have, the ability to generally choose between options in an arbitrary way. Well, but that's the thing. You can't truly believe that your choices are arbitrary without believing that your choices are being influenced by some extra physical thing, right? Because there is nothing arbitrary about reality, right? I agree that the arbitrary part is important, but that's what I would disagree with the most. I don't believe that anything in reality is arbitrary. Define arbitrariness. Could be A or B. You don't really know. For instance, if I drop this phone, the path of the phone and the fact that it's going to hit the ground is not arbitrary at all, right? It's what would be the opposite of arbitrary? I'm trying to think of like the antonym. On the level of choices a person makes, many things are arbitrary. I think that things have the illusion of being arbitrary because of the biological mechanisms set in place for us to make decisions. They seem arbitrary, but I don't believe that. So, like, for instance, if I did a very surface level examination of myself, me being a professional streamer maybe seems like it happened due to many individual arbitrary choices that I made along the way. I made the choice to do blah, 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 blah. But if I think a little bit deeper about it, maybe the reason I'm here is because I grew up playing video games, because my parents bought me consoles at an early age. I spent a lot of time playing video games. I also spent a lot of time entertaining friends at school. I spent a lot of time hanging out with people and making people laugh. Like, these are things that I did growing up that kind of, there was kind of like a path, a somewhat predictable path to me arriving where I did. That it wasn't really a bunch of arbitrary decisions, but they were actually somewhat predictable. I guess the point is that I feel like I can construct a better moral system with determinism than I can construct with compatibilism, because I think compatibilism still gives you wiggle room to put people in bad situations and expect them to act better than it, whereas determinism gives you the ultimate compulsion to construct the best environment possible. Does that make sense? If you believe in compatibilism, then you believe that there's still the possibility of people to rise above their circumstances or something like that, right? Whereas if I believe in determinism, I think that everybody's environment needs to be optimized as fuck, because I don't know if people are going to be able to, not everybody can escape their circumstances, right? I feel like determinism gives you a motivation to optimize environments, whereas compatibilism can let you slide a little bit on that. Compatibilism isn't a moral system. I know compatibilism isn't a moral system, but I'm saying that a determinist would have a greater compulsion to construct it. That's why I said you can construct a moral system like off of these beliefs, right? Or that you would construct a better policy or better morals off of these beliefs than a compatibilist would. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say moral system. Maybe I should say policy. With determinism, what motivation is there to do anything? Are we slaves to fate, going through the motions? Sure, but you can still argue that that the consequences that you set can influence the deterministic environment. For instance, okay, so let's say that we have free will and a determinist in the room, okay? Let's say that we're talking about punishment, okay? So the standard argument, we punish people for bad behavior to discourage behavior, right? The free will person says, well, Mr. Determinist, why would you punish somebody if they were always going to commit that action? Shouldn't you not punish people then, because they're not actually moral agents? They're not agents of free will, or they don't have free will, so they can't choose anything? Then the determinist would say, well, when somebody makes a decision, they're factoring in the punishment and all of that, and then that punishment will also influence future decisions. So having that punishment present is a way to influence the decisions that they're going to make. So even if we are determinists, we can argue in favor of these consequences, because the consequences will be baked into your system. Does that make sense? That's how I'm saying that like a deterministic person could still construct a moral system or policies that would work, that would have logical consequences to actions, and there's got to be somebody that's written like a million books on this shit, I'm sure. Like,